My dudes, we once again find ourselves on a Wednesday, which of course in turn means we once again find ourselves wandering down the bottomless pit of oblivion that is my Planet Coaster series, Velocity Lake, in which we construct a theme park called Velocity Lake in the video game Planet Coaster. And we're going to be jumping off right away on where we left off last week, which was of course finishing up the RMC track layout that you see here. This week we're going to do some custom support work for not only the lift hill, but also there's a bit of the track you can kind of see in the background there that runs underneath the supports for a bit of track above it, and as such it deleted those supports and left the track above it levitating magically, which, you know, I'm trying to go for a realistic park. Probably not that realistic to have levitating track. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure defying the laws of physics is not a very realistic thing to do when designing a theme park. So we're going to have to address that at some point in this episode as well. First things first, though, we are going to do the lift hill, and I need to construct a catwalk as well. Unfortunately, on this coaster, you can't have a catwalk and no support, so it'd be nice if you could have the stock catwalk but no supports below it. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. Unfortunately, the Planet Coaster pieces aren't quite small enough to make good catwalks that are as good as the stock catwalk, but I guess for wooden coasters, it's a bit easier to kind of make it fit in with the rest of the track because the supports themselves are very clunky and big and they blend in pretty well. It's much harder to do things, I don't know, for like B&M steel coasters where everything's very clean. It's harder to make good-looking catwalks in this game. At least for my poor level of building skill. I'm sure there are people out there who can make good catwalks. I am just not one of these people. And of course, I guess you can do good custom catwalks using the Theme Maker's Toolkit, but I mentioned before in this series that I try and avoid using Theme Maker's Toolkit because whenever I watch Planet Coaster build videos, I always like seeing the creative ways in which players can get around the limitations of the stock parts list. I think Theme Maker's Toolkit kind of takes away from that. Now, granted, Theme Maker's Toolkit is still very good. If you want to make a realistic park, it's damn near essential. And I do appreciate. I don't judge anyone for using it. By no means, I don't think you're a less skilled player for using it. That's what I like watching in Planet Coaster videos, though, is seeing the way in which players overcome the various challenges of using stock parts. And, you know, when I make videos, I try and emulate the things that I like seeing in videos, which for me means trying to avoid Theme Maker's Toolkit whenever I can. And that's another thing. That's how I kind of got started with my Kerbal Space Program videos, actually. I used to just make music videos, I guess, in the style of Hazardish at the time, and I guess people like Strats and Blitz used to make music videos. But these days, a lot of my old music videos, unfortunately, have been taken down off YouTube by strikes by Warner Brothers Music Company. So it's just not logistically possible for me to make music videos anymore, which is a bit of a shame. I have been trying to go through the ones that got banned worldwide and replace the audio, but it's just not the same using royalty-free music because everyone on YouTube uses the same 5 royalty-free songs, and it's really hard to find good ones that other people don't use. So I've just kind of accepted that most of my Kerbal Space Program back catalogue from 2015 and 2016 has just disappeared off the internet. I mean, like, it wasn't even monetized. It wasn't like I was monetizing a video and then got caught out. I left it unmonetized and just let the record label monetize it. But it seems like record labels these days have been taking like a really harsh stance on letting their music be used in YouTube. Initially, like in 2015, 2016, which is when I used to make music videos, you could use a piece of copyrighted music and the record label would just monetize the video and that was that. But now they're just banning the song's use entirely. So you can't even use the song. Your video would just get banned rather than just have it be monetized and claimed by the musician, which to me was a fair solution. You know, it's win-win. I mean, I don't think it's particularly fair because if I spend, like Junior Attacks, for example, was an hour-long video. I spent months on it, but because some of the songs were copyrighted, they were entitled to the entirety of the monetization of that video. I feel like there should be some split in place there, but I guess they can enjoy the revenue from that million-view video. They can enjoy their crisp £20 that video probably earned. Anyway, this is kind of an irrelevant topic really to this video, but I guess I have already talked about kind of the methodology behind the construction of this support lift structure for the lift hill. For those that didn't watch last week, it's basically it's inspired. It's not a carbon copy because it's far more intricately detailed than the Zadra lift hill for the Zadra coaster in Energylandia in Poland, in the city of Krakow. Yeah, I was saying last week that I mispronounced that city, so I'm pronouncing it correctly first time, this time around. Yeah, that is a fairly new RMC coaster. I believe Zadra is Polish for Splinter. I'm pretty sure. But my Polish is a bit rusty. There's a lot of Polish people in my country, in Plymouth especially. I don't know if Plymouth has more Polish people than most places, but there are a lot of Polish people here. And I used to live with a couple, so I kind of picked up a few Polish words. I don't know how Splinter. Maybe I just know Splinter is Zadra because of the Zadra coaster. But there are certain Polish words I know because of things like, I don't know. A lot of like Polish children in this country are raised to speak Polish as their first language. So when they come to me for their eye tests, when I'm at my real job, if they don't know their letters yet, we have like a vision chart that has pictures instead. There's like a duck, a house, a mug and stuff like that. And oftentimes I'll say, what's that picture there? And the child will say the Polish for that picture rather than the English because, they've only learned Polish so far. So I've kind of picked up the Polish for a lot of things like that. So like duck is kaszka, I think, and fish is liba. I'm probably completely butchering the pronunciation of these words, but I don't know. It's funny how when you see like, I don't know, English kids call it like the wrong thing. For example, one child there's like a picture of like a cartoonish looking house, and this child called it a pub, and I was like, well, we know where mum and dad are taking you. And one called a mug, like a mug of tea. They called it a wine glass, which I guess says a lot. I thought that was pretty funny. And other things, just pretty sweet, like calling the duck a penguin. Anyway, that was another kind of a weird tangent. But again, I'm not really doing much variety of stuff this episode. It's basically just building custom wooden supports, which is a very long-winded process and a pretty repetitive process. So I'm just trying to keep things going with the quality of my commentary, which is a bad plan because the quality of my commentary often does leave stuff to be desired. If there's any recompense, there will be a POV at the end of this video with sound and with the new custom supports. Last week, we didn't have the blue color on the POV and there was no sound on the POV, so you had to endure my commentary for it, but not the case this week. There will be sound for the POV. Oh, and speaking of, here's a little POV here, played at like 10 times speed, so you couldn't really appreciate much. And then we can cut back to building the lift hill. For those that don't know, these aren't actually Theme Maker's Toolkit beams. I believe they're the poles that came with the Ghostbusters DLC pack. They make really, really good custom supports because the wooden pieces, I used them for the catwalk, but they just look a bit too naff looking, I think. These poles look much, much cleaner, much more modern, which I think fits with the aesthetic I wanted to go with for this coaster. Now, I thought it looked a bit spindly and a bit weedy. I probably should have reduced the gap between the vertical poles on that structure. I mean, maybe it's realistic. I mean, the actual real RMC supports for these sorts of lift hills do look fairly unsubstantial like that, but they tend to be a bit thicker. I'm not sure if that's really enough I don't know if that structure is really substantial enough to hold up the lift hill that it's currently supposedly holding up. So I decided to double up the structure, which I thought I was about to do there because I'd duplicated the arch across, but I will be doing that at some point imminently. We'll be basically doubling up the structure to kind of create the illusion of a more reinforced building, I suppose. Well, not building. It should be structure, but I've said the word structure too many times at this point. And I try and add some variety to the old lexicon whilst I'm doing these commentaries because it makes me seem cleverer than I probably actually am. All right. Do you want to know the truth, guys? You want to know the truth? Do you want real talk? That's it. Yeah, there's the archway underneath. I was saying last week, a lot of these, well, the two that I know of these custom RMCs, they tend to have the big lift hill arch, like I've just built there, and then they have a stall going underneath it to not only facilitate, not only to reinforce the structure of the arch above it, but also to kind of create a cool looking, a grand spectacle for the lift hill itself. And like I said, this coaster is right by the entrance to the park, right by the monorail that passes by, that carries guests to the entrance of the park. I wanted to have a really good first impression for guests. And I feel this roller coaster really fulfilled that requirement, especially, with that big custom lift hill. That's the sole reason I wanted to do an RMC for this bit, because I really like the look of the custom lift hills with the big stall archway underneath that first drop. And big vertical first drops always look impressive, I think, as well. I know it's not technically fully vertical, but it's damn near close enough. It's like saying, Oblivion at Alton Towers isn't actually a vertical drop, it's 88 degrees. Like, it's basically vertical. When you're on the ride, it will feel vertical, I'm sure. Now we're just adding some more reinforcements to the arch, moving on again. We're adding some more reinforcements to the arch underneath the lift hill. I wasn't actually using a visual reference for this, which I probably should have in retrospect if I wanted to go for a completely realistic look. I was basically just building it and then zooming out and deciding whether or not it looked realistically dense enough to hold up the weight of the track, and if it didn't, I'd go back and just add more, and then just keep doing that until I was satisfied with how it looked. I don't know, this probably wouldn't work structurally wise in real life. I wasn't really applying much of my very limited, basically non-existent architectural knowledge, but I think for the sake of how it looks, and it looks like it should work, and that's good enough for me. We're now moving on to another piece of custom sport work. I was saying earlier that there's a few tunnels on this ride where some track passes below track above it. And as such, it removes the stock supports and results in the track above it just floating there mysteriously. So this is one of those cases there we have to just go back and try and build some support work that match it. I want to make it look like it blends in with the supports above it. And I think, whilst you can kind of tell it's not part of the stock support, I think it's good enough really for what I needed it to do. So that's what we're doing here, this part here. And there's a far longer stretch, which I'm not actually sure if we do this episode or if we do next episode. Being a wooden coaster, the custom supports take a long time on this on this ride. So the station building, I believe, will be next episode, and we'll probably do a few more custom supports in that episode as well. We do a few other things on this ride as well that I know for a fact. I'm pretty sure. I'm 98% certain we didn't do any of this episode. We built some tunnels. So a few of the dips and like hills, the roller coaster train will pass through some tunnels, just kind of bump that excitement rating up. And I think this ride now has the highest excitement rating of any other ride in the park. If there's any competition, it'll be between this and the B&M sit down, and then the B&M Giga that we build in a few episodes' time. It'd be a tie between those three, but I think this one just edges it out over the red one. I honestly couldn't tell you about the big B&M Giga, because as I speak, like now for me, I haven't actually finished work on that ride, so I should probably start doing playing some more Planet Coaster in order to get that done. But I think the excitement rating is pretty close, if not surpasses this RMC here. But for now, it is the most exciting ride. But we can further increase the excitement rating by building lots of scenery next to the ride. If you have lots of scenery in close proximity to a ride, it does increase the in-game excitement rating. So tunnels, bridges, custom support are all good things in terms of increasing the excitement rating. And I don't know if the custom catwalk that you can kind of add to the ride, and by custom catwalk I mean the is it called the custom catwalk? Optional catwalk is what it's called in the game. Having a catwalk alongside the track, I think, has some sort of influence over the excitement rating. For better, for worse, I'm not sure. Based on the fact that it might be classed as scenery in-game, it will probably make sense that it increases the excitement rating. But I'm not quite sure. Anyway, just to help break this commentary up a little bit, here's a POV. Much like the ones I did last week, this is a mid-video POV, and as such, it's not played at real time. It's just 2x speed, just to give you an overall kind of sense of how this ride is panning out as we get decapitated by that support clipping through the train and the track. Just to give you an idea of how the smoothness and overall layout of this ride is panning out. But don't worry, like I say, at the end of this video, there will be a real-time POV with sound, so you can appreciate this thing in all of its majesty, which actually is not that far away, the end of this video. Where are we now? 13 minutes in. There's only about 8 or 9 more minutes of building left, so we probably won't end up doing all of the again, I probably should have checked the footage ahead of time before I started doing this commentary, so I knew exactly what I'd be talking about, but I only actually edited this footage yesterday, so I feel like I should probably remember, but obviously I didn't. Hence why I didn't remember. What I'm going to do is I've just finished doing the commentary for the episode that you guys would have seen last week, as in me building the layout of this track. Literally seconds before I started this one, I finished that. And then as soon as I finish this one, I'm probably going to immediately start doing the commentary for next week's episode as well. Just because if it for working on a roller coaster where it's basically be very similar talking points each episode, if I just do them all back to back to back to back, it means I'm definitely not repeating what I'm saying, or at least no more than how much I repeat the things I say normally in this series. Like, I don't want to go over some long-winded explanation about some certain aspect of this ride and then say the exact same thing pretty much verbatim next episode because I forgot I talked about it in the previous week. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. It also helps me keep track of what exactly I've done in the previous episodes, like what exactly we touched upon. Like, okay, in this episode we did this, and in this episode we did that. Oh, by the way, here we are. I started talking earlier, ages ago now at this point, about reinforcing that big archway that holds up the lift hill. There's the reinforcement there. So now it's a little bit overbuilt compared to real RMCs, but this is a very tall RMC. It's a very modern RMC. Velocity Lake, it's in a very windy area, and we wanted to make sure it wouldn't blow over. Zadra, during its construction, did fall over. We don't want that to happen. I'm assuming now that it's built, it won't, but, we could never be too careful in this world. Ooh. And here we are, constructing some custom supports, like I said earlier, that I said I probably wasn't going to put in this episode. We actually are. Whether or not we do them in their... Whether or not we do them in their entirety, I'm not quite sure. Probably shouldn't talk so fast. That's probably why I find it so difficult to fill these commentaries up, because I talk at 10,000 miles an hour, and then I get to the point where I'm like, well, I've talked about everything now. Now I'm just going to and ah my way through the next 20 minutes of this video and struggle to think of meaningful things to say. But yeah, we've done the vertical aspect of this support here. We need to do some footers, but they'll take seconds. Now we need to do the horizontal structure for them. You can see it's not quite the same in terms of the actual aesthetic style of the stock support. You can see these beams are a little bit thicker, but I guess that could be believable. They are forming the base of the support, so it might make sense that the beams there are thicker than the ones above them. Thicker, spelled with two C's there. But yeah, it's not ideal. Ideally, I probably would have used a plank of wood from the Theme Maker's Toolkit. Someone out there has probably made ones that look identical to the stock supports for this coaster type. But, I try and avoid Theme Maker's Toolkit when I can, because I prefer seeing the stock scenery, which I know I've already talked about, so I won't address too thoroughly. This is another part of the ride where there was some floating support, so I had to kind of rebuild the structure. Obviously, we can't build down to support it on the ground because there's track going underneath it, but just having some kind of horizontal framework in place to keep this thing nice and structurally sound, that's what I'm doing there. Not sure if we finished that part of the ride this episode, but we will get back. We will finish it at some point. Now, I think I'm just watching the train go around, seeing if there's any parts where the scenery is still clipping through the rails, which I think there is just before the stall or just after the stall. I'm not sure. We're about to find out. Here we go. Maybe it was too fast. The frame rate for me is very slow, so if I might miss things. We're gonna. Yeah, okay. There was supports going through the track. Never mind. The frame rate is very slow for me because I'm editing it in Sony Vegas, and when you're editing the raw files, it's not been rendered. The frame rate is about, I don't know, it's not that bad. I think probably about 12 or 5, I don't really know, frames per second. So it's not ideal, especially when you're playing the footage back at 12 times speed, but you can generally get a good gist of what's going on. But in this case, like I said, I didn't. Yeah. We're doing it again. Is it fixed? Looked it to me, but again, I couldn't quite tell. Was it fixed? Oh, I've zoomed out. I'm not working on it, so I'm guessing it is fixed. So I guess I'm just panning around now, just inspecting the ride, see if there's any other areas of the supports that need addressing, and I guess we're going to carry on working with this part here towards the end of the ride. I might just speed up the footage a little bit here because we've already done this bit before, and we'll just gradually increase the velocity using the Sony Vegas. This is what it's come to, me just editing videos on the fly and commentating over them as I do it. But it's a pretty long stretch of track just here that needs support work over it, so it's gonna be it was a fairly boring process. Thank goodness I have two monitors so I could just watch something on the other one whilst I did this thing. It's not the most boring stuff I've had to do for YouTube. The things that really stood out to me were the worst was the 124-seat lathe SSTO that I uploaded in the ancient times of 2017. I had to get all 124 Kerbals out on EVA, and it took literally an hour and a half to do it. I just watched like a variety of YouTube videos on the other screen and just gradually EVA'd the Kerbals. having all those Kerbals there just tanked the frame rate so badly, especially because it was a less stable version of Kerbal Space Marine at that point before the big engine upgrades, especially with the 1.8 update that came out pretty recently. The frame rate was just awful. It got to the point where I just trying to walk them from the SSTO to where the other Kerbals were would cause a game crash, so I had to use Vessel Mover to move each individual Kerbal, and then just... It was a very slow, long-winded, boring process, much like, you know, the construction of custom sports on this coaster, and probably much like you watching this series, but hopefully not. Hopefully I have provided somewhat of an audio stimulus whilst you watch the birth of this ride and the supports that hold it up. Yes. What am I doing now? I'm still doing the same. I'm still doing the same sports. It doesn't look. It's not really that realistic. I don't think the way the forces are distributed on this support is very realistic. I think the whole thing would just come crashing down in real life. But it looks okay from a distance, and what I'm doing is I'm just adding more and more beams until it looks kind of clustered enough that it would probably have some kind of support to keep it from falling over. And I was pretty happy with kind of having a sort of janky look to it. I think it looks kind of cool, maybe. No, I'm just justifying my laziness, really, to be honest. That being said, we haven't got too much longer left in this commentary, so I hope you guys are enjoying this the construction of this ride so far. This is one of my favorite I say this about every single roller coaster I build in this series, granted, but this is one of my favorite coasters I've built in this game. Not just in this part, but in this game entirely. So, and I hope you like it as well. This is one of the tunnels here. This will eventually be the entrance to the ride, so guests pass underneath this tunnel here. I also couldn't face doing custom support, so that massive lattice structure above that corner there, so I just decided to put a big tunnel underneath it, and that just provided a solid foundation, like footprint area for the supports above it. It was out of laziness, really, that tunnel there, and then to kind of create a transition between these two supports here, which are at slightly different horizontal placements. Again, I just put a tunnel there and just had that serve as a kind of footprint. So it's a bit of a lazy method, wasn't really that realistic, but it does look kind of cool as a sort of feature for the ride to go through as a sort of on-ride experience. And you may have, if you blink and you miss it, but you may have seen me place a camera there just to serve as an on-ride photo opportunity for the guests. The final thing I'm doing here is just adding some signposts on the lift hill, so as they go up, another message appears. So I think I went with a few. I think I went with don't look down first, and then I think I went with prepare to scream, because that's what the name of this ride will be. There's the big reveal. I decided to call this ride Scream, because a lot of people will probably scream on this ride because it's very scary. I mean, I wouldn't scream because I'm brave, you know. I had my flu vaccine recently, and the nurse said I was very brave. I only cried a tiny bit. And she gave me a sticker and a pen, and I got a free bacon butty voucher as well. I mean, the NHS really pushes for its staff to get vaccinated. I don't know why everyone just doesn't. You get a free bacon butty or vegetarian equivalent, and you get a sticker, a highlighter pen, which is really useful. You get a post-it, but they basically bribe us to get flu vaccines. So I'll take it. I would just get it anyway, and because I don't really want the flu. So that's why. I think that's pretty much why everyone gets it, to be honest. Anyway. Here we are at the POV. Also, it says don't look down at the moment, but that will change. I'm going to shut up now. You can enjoy the POV, and I'll see you at the end. And there we are, looping back to what will become the station. There was a few custom supports sticking through the track still that need addressing, but think it's pretty much good there. On screen, there are links. On the left-hand side is a link to the full Velocity Lake playlist, and on the right is one chosen for you by YouTube's recommendation bots. There's also a link to subscribe. Check out Patreon if you'd like to, and in the description you'll find links to Instagram, merchandise, Discord, all that good stuff. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.